With the most smokers in sub-Saharan Africa, Kenya has become a major market for big tobacco, despite the fatal threat its products pose to the nation's health. But with the industry's profits now under pressure from regulators, journalist Purity Mwambia went to investigate shocking allegations of bribery and corruption.
Big tobacco is a billion-dollar industry, but it has a big problem. In most parts of the world, its market is shrinking, restricted by health concerns. Africa is its biggest growing market. Here in Kenya, the health ministers have been trying to change that, but it's alleged that some of their colleagues have been taking money from the industry.
They could have got up to £100,000, they could have got more, they could have got less. Again, it would depend on what they were being asked to do.
The courts are a battleground.
If you get through with anything, they will delay it, they will dilute it, and in the end, they will destroy it.
Meanwhile, the people who grow the product have their own problems. The sickness that he's suffering from right now could have been caused by the pesticide that he used. My name is Purity Mwambia, and I am an investigative journalist in Kenya. But inside here, I can see a lot of pesticide. It's strong. Kenya is worried about its people's health. It's been trying to control cigarette sales. But it's also a big exporter of tobacco. Tobacco earns Kenya $100 million a year, giving work to 80,000 people. More than a half are farmers. And big tobacco is a very big taxpayer, over $1 billion a year. Does the tobacco industry use that economic power to slow down health legislation? Here in Kenya, we bought 8 billion cigarettes last year. You started smoking at what age?
12, 13 years.
I started smoking when I was 16 or 17 years old. This cigarette, even if it costs 100,000 per cigarette, I'll still buy it.
Why?
Because I like it.
Africa is now the largest developing market for tobacco, but both smoking and producing cigarettes have been linked to fatal diseases. Kenyan politicians have been fighting to pass new regulations which would strengthen tobacco controls. They want graphic images on packages to warn smokers. They would ban advertising and promotion of tobacco and impose an extra 2% health tax on every packet. But the tobacco industry has deep pockets and has been fighting these controls. In July last year, MPs on the Health Committee were invited on all-expenses trip to visit the British operations of the biggest cigarette manufacturer in Kenya, British American Tobacco, BAT. Stephen Mule sits on the Health Committee, and he was angered by BAT's behavior.
My take is very simple. Why do you want to spend money to take us to UK when you can invite us to the factory, which is 30 minutes away? You want to use the trip to entice us? To agree with you? No. No. We know the cigarette being smoked in Kenya, it is manufactured in Kenya. And they never dared even to invite us to their factory locally. So it doesn't make sense at all, at all.
The UK trip was later called off. In March this year, more lobbying allegations surfaced in the Kenyan parliament. Members of two key committees were invited to another all-expense trip by other tobacco companies, this time to a seaside resort.
The press exposed them. They were to be taken to Mombasa, the two committees of health and the delegated legislation. And then the civil society organizations also kept on tweeting and sending SMS and emails to members of parliament. So they knew that this was not going to work.
Both committees turned the trip down. Allegations about trying to influence politicians in this way are nothing new.
They wanted their influence to bear on the committees of parliament to block the regulations by offering various goodies, which included pleasure trips to Mombasa, for example.
In 2004, when the tobacco bill was being debated, 40 MPs were entertained at a resort by local tobacco growers, sponsored by BAT.
We are beyond issues of taking people to holidays, try to sweet talkers, no way. So long as I sit in the Committee of Health, please, you can't manipulate us. That one I want to give it a very clear.
What's behind all this is a global initiative by the World Health Organization.
Well, the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control is the world's first public health treaty, and it was developed under the auspices of the World Health Organization. And what the treaty does is it puts in place evidence-based tobacco control measures, and all those countries that have signed up to the treaty are now legally obliged to implement those measures. And the importance is this: tobacco is the single biggest cause of preventable mortality worldwide. So if these countries can all implement this treaty effectively, it will make the single biggest contribution to public health that's possible.
The convention has been adopted by 180 countries. Kenya was the first in Africa to ratify. One of its key sections says this, that countries must
protect their tobacco control and public health policies from commercial and other vested interests of the tobacco industry.
Article 5.3 is all about protecting public health policies from the tobacco industry. And it's in the treaty because of overwhelming evidence that the tobacco industry has for years attempted to prevent governments from implementing effective policies. I mean, at the end of the day, the tobacco industry is all about profit. It has to sell as many cigarettes as possible, as profitably as possible, and the evidence shows that it will stop at nothing in order to maximise its sales and profits.
Even so, documents leaked to Al Jazeera show how the industry has demanded the right to influence the laws. In March last year, BAT told senior health officials that some of the key regulations must be reviewed. In December, BAT asked to meet the Attorney General to suggest alternative options for effective control measures. 2 weeks later, the company was requesting an urgent meeting with civil servants to discuss the potential impact on tobacco manufacturers. By February, the President's office was passing the Health Ministry a letter from the International Trade Ministry. Trade wanted the regulations withdrawn and developed afresh, where the laws should not infringe on the commercial and intellectual property rights of tobacco manufacturers.
The ministries of health normally understand the health impacts of the tobacco products, the impacts of tobacco control policies. And so what the tobacco industry does is just access other ministries, ministries of finance, Ministry of Trade, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Employment, which are generally more powerful ministries, and uses those ministries to oppose the Ministry of Health.
BAT considers that it has the right to engage in formulating legislation under the Kenyan Constitution. Despite all the lobbying, MPs stuck to their guns and passed regulations putting health warnings on the packet and adding a 2% health tax. All this is on hold since BAT launched a legal challenge which will be decided in the High Court next February. I've come to a ceremony for new members of the Kenyan Tobacco Control Board. The new generals fighting what they call a war against the tobacco industry.
Ladies and gentlemen, tobacco industry interference remains a real and formidable threat to our efforts and is now threatening to water down all our hard-earned success. It's really a war because you've seen what happens with the industry. Thank you very much, and may God bless you.
If the health ministry is clear that it's at war with tobacco, other ministries see the industry in a very different light. I am now headed to Likoni Road, where the British American Tobacco headquarters in Kenya are based. The company has just invested $1.5 million in a new distribution hub.
We've got a very efficient factory here. We continue to invest. We've invested 6 billion shillings in the last 5 years within this factory. The reason we've tripled our production over the last 10 years is because, as well as supplying the local market, we now export to 16 countries within the region.
Guest of honor was the Cabinet Industry Secretary, Aden Mohammed, who was very positive.
We want to make sure that the environment is conducive for them to continue to expand their business, so that if they win, we win.
In February, BAT posted global profits of over $9 billion, to which Kenya contributed $27.5 million. I wanted to see what this powerful multinational corporation was up against. I went to the Minister of Health to visit the headquarters of the Tobacco Control Board, and I was surprised to find a tiny, understaffed, and under-resourced office.
We have had problems in implementing the Act itself. Once we see the light of the day with regulations, with the fighting tobacco control.
BAT say they conduct their business with honesty, integrity, and transparency, and are committed to high standards of corporate behavior. But word reached us from London that a key ex-employee of the company had some shocking allegations. Security expert Paul Hopkins spent 14 years with BAT in Kenya and other African countries. He says he witnessed unlawful payments from the Nairobi office to important people, and he says this came from BAT's corporate and regulatory affairs team, CORA.
They will take ministers and government officials on supposedly workshops to lovely hotels along the coast of Mombasa, give them holidays. They'll also, of course, pay them money.
One of the people who benefited, he claims, is a former trade minister, Moses Wetangula. Paul Hopkins says was asked by the CORA team at BAT to arrange a business class flight for his wife to visit London during the 2012 Olympics.
CORA approached me. They wanted this to be that there was no paper trail. The tickets were paid for cash and then were delivered to his bodyguard.
Senator Wetangula strongly denies the allegations and says his wife did not go to London. He says he had no interaction with BAT as trade minister. Hopkins says CORA asked him to make untraceable cash payments to lobbyists.
They approached me and they said, you have a very sophisticated system set up for paying your informants. Can you facilitate paying some lobbyists that have considerably helped us in lobbying the governments of Burundi, Comores, Uganda, etc.
Hopkins says a private security firm had a system which allowed him to deliver untraceable cash. He used it to pay $45,000 to the people CORA said were lobbyists.
We organized that money was handed over to the people that CORA had designated us to hand it over to. It was only on one of those last payments, my service provider called me and advised me that, Paul, by the way, these guys are not lobbyists. Some of these guys are actually sitting government ministers.
The security contractors were so concerned that they wrote a formal letter to Hopkins at BAT asking him to inform his bosses because they did not want BAT or themselves to
run foul of the UK Bribery Act.
In documents supplied to an employment court, BAT accepted that unlawful bribes were paid, but it said that the people who paid them were acting against company policy. On its website, BAT says the allegations were made by rogue former employees whose employment was terminated in acrimonious circumstances and who have a clear vendetta against us. Mr. Hopkins says he lost his job unfairly. Proceedings brought by him in London were dismissed on the grounds that England was not the right jurisdiction for the hearing of that claim.
I wasn't ethically shocked. I mean, most major Fortune 500 companies that are doing business in Africa are going to be paying somebody. If you aren't paying somebody, you're not going to get anything. You're not going to get the licenses. You're not going to get the work permits for your experts to come in. You're not going to get anything. That is the cost of doing business in the continent of Africa.
Even though some people may enjoy smoking, globally, tobacco kills more than 6 million people every year, remaining the largest preventable cause of death. Over 8 billion cigarettes were smoked in Kenya last year, up from 6 billion in 2013. Around 1 in 5 men smoke, and 1 in 10 of all 13 to 15-year-olds use tobacco. The tobacco industry has tried hard to oppose regulations, but some measures have got through and have been effective, like city center smoking bans. Here I am at the city center of Nairobi. This is one of the busiest streets, but when I look around, no one is smoking. They obey the law. Tobacco companies are making billions of dollars a year, but much of the processing done on their behalf is by thousands of small independent farmers. I left Nairobi to drive 400 miles to Migori to find out more about the lives of tobacco farmers. Here in Migori, the local agricultural minister tells us the BET has a virtual monopoly on buying tobacco and that thousands of small farmers are dependent on the company for their livelihood. BET deny this and say they purchased less than a fifth of the local crop this year. Many farmers in Migori were reluctant to talk to us, but I met one tobacco farmer who agreed to show me what was involved. Where did you get the pesticides from, Shadrach?
From company BET.
Were you given them for free?
No. Yuko kwa loan. Yeah. Tunalipa, hiyo ni mkopo tunakopa, alafu tunalipa wakati tunauza tobacco. Yeah.
Do you smoke?
No.
Why? Do you feel bad that whatever you're producing here in your farm is causing death to other people?
Yeah, hiyo ninajua, lakini ni ukosefu tu nini, ukosefu ya ajira.
Maybe you can now go and show me how you're going to cure. The curing process takes place in makeshift huts alongside the farmer's home. The process poses potential health risks. Why can't the tobacco industry do that? Why can't they do it in their company?
Kampuni hawezi chukua matawi bichi. Raw material hawezi chukua. Inafaa tuchome. Tukishachoma ndio tunachukua ikiwa ready.
That is the house that he uses to cure his tobacco. And it was going to take a week to complete the whole process. Wow.
Sasa hii nyumba.
And they're going to dig a hole down here, which will go 6 feet down. Yeah. The firewood will be put inside there, and then the leaves will be hung on top here, and he'll be ready to take his crop to the market. But inside here, I can see a lot of pesticides. Confido.
Yeah.
What is it used for? These are used during the planting when the seedling itself, when it's still in the nursery, that's when they use it. It's strong. It's okay. I met the county agricultural executive and asked her about the health risks faced by tobacco farmers.
One of the health risks for the tobacco farmers in Migori comes at the point of curing of tobacco. When with the curing of the tobacco, there's a lot of smoke, and when they inhale that smoke, it's associated with a number of respiratory diseases. Issues of the lung cancers, the throat cancers, all those are numerous health risks that our farmers are also exposed to. And ironically, as part of corporate social responsibility, American British Tobacco does not contribute to the construction of health facilities.
I was about to explore what the impact of years of exposure to fumes and pesticides might be. I went to meet a farmer who believed his health had been affected by growing tobacco. The curing hut is right opposite this farmer's home where he lives with his family. His name is Josephat Akongo. He's 66 years old. He's been ailing for the last 10 years. That's when the signs of his sickness started showing. And the doctor who was treating him did tell him that the sickness that he's suffering from right now could have been caused by the pesticide that he used. Josephat is suffering from severe liver damage and growths in his abdomen. I just asked Josephat if he was given any protective wear and if he was advised that he was supposed to use one. And he just said no. He says he's experiencing a lot of pain. That is completely swollen. That is why he has to change the position that he was lying because of too much pain. He says during his days he used to be very active. He says his body looks pathetic and he regrets for having done tobacco farming. 2/3 of medical cases in one tobacco farming district involve illnesses related to producing tobacco.
The social indicators among the tobacco growing farmers, they've never improved. There is high mortality. They've not been able to take their children to school well. And even in terms of nutrition, a number of them are food insecure, despite the so-called gains they're getting from the tobacco growing, given what the British American company pays to Migori farmers and the other related health consequences inclusive. As a county government, we're saying it is a rip-off. Our farmers are not benefiting at all. Yeah.
In February, the High Court will decide if BAT were properly consulted over the tobacco regulations. If they lose, they'll have to put graphic images on cigarette packets and they'll face an extra 2% health tax.
If you get 1 shilling from the tobacco industry as tax, you have to spend more than 3 shillings to offset the health damages. We are already sitting on an epidemic of the cancers, the diseases from tobacco. The tobacco problem is the most silent and declared national disaster in Kenya. And therefore, the more we delay, the more we will see more Kenyans die.
Paul Hopkins has been meeting with the Serious Fraud Office in London to discuss his allegations. BAT says it has dealt with these allegations of corruption. In a statement on its website, the company says,
any company can fall victim to an employee acting inappropriately, but what is most important is how it responds. BAT, with over 57,000 employees, is no different. We are rightly proud that any alleged breach of our very high expectations of transparency and honesty is swiftly investigated. Any proven transgression results in disciplinary action and may lead to dismissal. We do not tolerate corruption in our business, no matter where it takes place.
On farming, BAT's website says they
are committed to providing a safe working environment for all our employees and contractors. We will not tolerate working conditions that do not meet our own occupational health or safety standards. Our aim is to ensure that farmers' standards of living are maintained or increased through the introduction of good agricultural practices.
Shortly before this program went to air, BAT told us that it had had no relationship with Josephat Akongo for 13 years. 2 days after we filmed these images, Mr. Akongo died.